Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. And as I say, good afternoon. Hopefully, you're not listening to this first thing in the morning, but if you are, good morning.
How you doing, Brian?
Doing wonderful, Rob. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. It's just the two of us this time.
Just the two of us, but unlike when we dog you, Rob, I'm going to say that Tim's actually doing some work right now,
Here we
and
go.
he's making some money. So
There we
we'll,
go.
we'll let him off the hook today.
Okay. All right.
I'm
And
picking.
I'm
I'm
sure you say
picking.
that about me when I'm not here on these calls too,
Oh no,
right?
you should listen to this week's episode and trust me, you did not come out well on that one.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, but no, Tim will be with us again next week. But today it's just Rob and I out here, just gonna have a little roundtable fireside style chat, if you
Good.
will. I think.
Good. And Brian, I kind of want to jump in here and I kind of want to pick your brain. I have been hearing about compliance as a service. It just came out of nowhere, right? It was something that you heard about it and you kind of hear these, things popping up. But now it just seems like everywhere I go, thought leaders are just bam, 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 really marketing this hard. What is going on?
So, there's a number of different factors that are going on in the industry, right? We all know that security never goes out of style, and it's a security first conversation across all customers. Also, if you've been looking at your LinkedIn streams and, all the user groups, you're also seeing a lot about some of the challenges people are facing with cyber, getting themselves cyber insurance,
Mhm.
the cyber insurance companies that are exiting the marketplace. And, all these things are kind of a perfect storm of kind of things that bring together, like, how do we get compliance as a service? But that's a critical conversation in itself, because what does compliance as a service mean, especially to a company that doesn't have any regulatory requirements, right?
Mhm.
So let's kind of start first with the concept of compliance. So there are a lot of different frameworks out in the marketplace. Some are industry based and are really speaking to true blue compliance requirements. If I'm doing healthcare, everybody's familiar with HIPAA,
Right.
from a privacy
Mhm.
standpoint. And certainly if I'm a provider helping out healthcare customers, I need to help them either adhere to HIPAA as the provider from an IT space, but I'm also probably under a business associate contract and I need to
Correct.
operate at a HIPAA standard, right?
Right.
Manufacturing's got ISO as an example, ISO 2701 and
Mhm.
2702 standards that they manage to. So these are kind of more specific standards. Then there are frameworks, right? And frameworks are for customers that are really looking to put together a good cybersecurity posture.
Right.
Common frameworks you're going to hear out in the marketplace that talk about cybersecurity, that way: CIS controls. Certainly the NIST cybersecurity framework is another. When we look out over in the UK, we've got Cyber Essentials. Down in Australia, it's the Essential 8. These are all controls frameworks that really make sure that you've got good cyber hygiene. And a lot of this, when we hear compliance as a service talk, it's not just coming from the regulatory based requirements. We haven't even touched upon NIST and DoD with CMMC and NIST
Yeah. That's a whole
800-171 and
nother animal.
supplier risk,
Yep.
but those things fall in this basket too. What more and more customers are trying to do is make sure that they've got a good cyber posture, that they're protecting their environment. So if that breach happens, they're not going to get crushed on cyber liability as well. And not get a claim paid and potentially be out of business, right?
Mhm.
Those are things that they're concerned about. So the reason compliance as a service is getting hot is it now is becoming, it's going from the industry based regulations and the ability to do business within that industry as a result of those bases or those overarching regulations, into now state driven cybersecurity requirements. I know many of you that have listened to the show have heard me talk a few different times about Connecticut, Ohio, and Utah as an example, enacting the ability to stay away from punitive damage by putting in frameworks like CIS or CMMC, and being able to show that you're following those compliance frameworks, you're identifying your risk, you're accepting the risk you need to accept directly that you can't fix. And as you build a plan of action, what they call a POAM, plan of action and milestones, that you're actually tracking and doing the work as scheduled in that plan of action and milestones. If you can show those things, you're not going to be held punitively liable if a breach occurs here, at least in the great state of Connecticut. So these things are driving opportunity to the MSPs, because now you don't need to be part of a true regulatory, regulated industry to start being able to talk to customers about compliance as a service. And now you're talking about really maintaining good cyber health and making sure that you've got compliance baked around it. So what do these offerings generally include, right? There's two approach models to it. There's just a pure software based model to it, where the customers are really just kind of implementing different vulnerability scanners and SIM tools and the other things within their security stack, so they can identify when they're out of compliance with various regulations. And those are awesome, man. Critical need for all companies. It really, if you think of the NIST stack, it's really looking at the identify, detect, contain kind of methodologies that go
Of
in
course,
that.
yeah.
Then, you got to look at where's the governance side of this, right? How are we making sure that these tools are reporting in right? How do we know that we're taking the remediation steps? How are we making sure that we're adhering and our policies are up to date and our policies are being communicated? And this is a personal area. I mean, this was not meant to be a conversation that included VCIO Toolbox in any way, but we built our GRC tool because that layer on top of what the tools do is what's now needed and is now a huge advisory opportunity to the MSP space.
Okay, so let's hold on for a second.
Yeah.
So you know me, I always like to go to the prospecting side, go to the sales rep side, and how can we make money off this? So I am hearing a lot of buzz, and people are at the forefront of this, are getting really good appointments with this type of conversation with clients. But I'm seeing it with clients, not prospects. Is this a good tool or a good conversation starter for prospects, or is this mostly for your account managers out there?
I think so. Let's put that two ways. I think it remains to be seen with the prospects.
Mhm.
Education at the end user level outside of the enterprise tends to be much slower, right?
You're right.
But how does that demand start? It starts with educating the industry leaders or
Mhm.
when I say industry leaders, those account managers who are front facing to the customers up front. Now, we're an industry of shiny toys.
Right.
When we see something that is penetrating a door, we tend to grab it, shake it down, and use it for all it's worth for 6 to 9 months, and then try to find the next entry point in, right?
Yep. Yep.
So this is the one we're on right now. But there's some legitimacy to it, right? The customer is finally starting to feel the pitch, right? It really comes down to the customer is starting to know people that have suffered a breach now, right?
Yeah.
Ransomware has gotten wide enough that it's not just stories you see on the news. People know people in their, people they do business with, their town, other areas that have been hit with ransomware, and it's becoming a little bit closer to home. The other thing is cyber liability insurance is so out of control right now. All of a sudden, there's this cost that really didn't exist to them 4 or 5 years ago, right?
Right.
That now is a potentially expensive cost within their industry. So the customer is getting a little bit educated through the pain, right? And we always sell to the pain, right? You reiterate that every week, sell to the pain point,
That's
right?
right.
The second thing is there's a huge, where the opportunity comes back to the MSP is the tools in our industry are finally maturing to that point to handle some of this. But I'm going to give you where the real opportunity, from my humble opinion, comes from.
Okay.
The changing landscape of the MSP. We all know break fix is almost dead. I mean, you guys can all argue with me, but it's dying. It's slowly going away. The systems are smart enough. The tools are smart enough that you're just not fixing things like we once did.
Mhm.
Customers have moved to the cloud. The cloud acceleration that happened during the COVID era was huge,
Mhm.
right? Because customers had to answer the bell to those needs, and those concerns of being in the cloud started going away because now there was nobody in their offices to manage these things, right?
Mhm.
So, the cloud proliferations happen. And now, and we've talked about this often, the MSP needs to reinvent themselves. They are no longer going to be doing the services of the past the same way they did. It's why we're seeing all these SaaS monitoring tools coming into play now too,
Yeah.
because the standard monitoring of the past of assets back at the office For some customers, it's nothing more than a firewall and some desktops and a switch, right? So where's the next, opportunity to identify vulnerability? And it certainly comes from your software stack, right? Now, the MSP in this process has to say, what am I going to be in the next generation?
Mhm.
Back in the early 2000s when I got into this, we went from project-based companies into becoming MSPs
Right.
around 2007, 2008. And I know I was on the early end of this curve. We started selling more data center services, and we were selling Citrix as cloud desktops back then to healthcare companies. As we continued to morph through the cloud, we were all went kicking and screaming out of selling Exchange and those, guaranteed renewals or refresh periods every 3 years into how do I make money with Office 365 when there's only about $1.50 on the spread, right?
Mhm.
So we're an industry that's continually adapting, and I think the leaders are looking at and saying, well, what's left on the bone that we can sell? And it really comes down to a few things. Security never goes out of style, but security advisory is now starting to become something that our end users really need. It's not about the point tools anymore, but it's how those point tools are being managed and how they're being reported on. So if something happens, the financial loss isn't too deep or candidly puts you out of business. Then step two is, we have to look at where else we could dive in. I'm seeing more and more MSPs starting to get involved with line of business applications, especially common ones, and adding QuickBooks expertise and Dynamics expertise. Well, once you do that, the securing of those environments become part of your responsibility again, which brings compliance as a service into bear. And then finally, you can get involved with automation and analytics as well, in this process. But really, the MSP's got to figure out, how am I going to do this when no longer is the screwdriver the ruler?
Correct. My question is this. Compliance as a service can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, right? But
Yep.
that sales rep who is trying to um, introduce his company to this, how do you start here? Like, what do you start with to
Well,
try and, make
I,
this a differentiator for your company versus the MSP down the road?
I think first and foremost, I think a lot of folks are building out their stacks so they can sell compliance as a service in an automated fashion from their stacks, right?
Okay.
They're bringing in MDR tools, EDR tools. They've got the SIM. They're backing themselves up with SOC-based services, that they can subscribe to. And basically, these systems are looking at various points on the network, whether it be at the software layer or the network layer. And when they identify an issue, they're also tying it together to the regulation that might be compromised as a result of it, right? So they're getting the evidentiary data very easily. And I think that's critical because let's say if your customer doesn't have a governance layer on top of it, but they have a breach. First thing that the incident response teams, which usually come from the insurance companies, are going to require from you is any of the evidence that exists. Get me the log files, the system files, the security files. And that's why the MSPs are really building out these security stacks because they got to also make sure that they've got the right tools in place to protect themselves from such an event. So step one is really looking at your account manager and saying, hey, here's our security stack. Here's what it can do. Go talk about it. And this is how it helps you meet compliance requirements, Mr. Customer.
Hmm.
Where I
Okay.
think the next level of opportunity is getting into the advisory side of the business and really playing the role of a vCISO in concert with a automated compliance as a service requirement. Now, this doesn't change all the acronyms we have. It can still be CC at, compliance as a service at the top level, but now you've got a layer that's kind of consultative as well. Or you can say it's vCISO as a service and you've got your compliance as a service stack behind here. So I don't want to get, caught up in our alphabet soup.
Right.
But really what it comes down to is a true blue security program. If I was in an enterprise and I was doing it, it would involve having a security officer who's managing over an InfoSec security plan. That
Mhm.
security plan is based on whatever framework or regulation I want to manage to. So my compliance might be insurance compliance now, and I choose to use a standard framework like CIS because I know if I do that, I'm going to manage all my downstream customers, and at least I should be able to answer 90% of the audits completely if I do that. Then I'm putting in my stack of tools, right? And this is to automatically stay in front of the monitoring and proactive nature that needs to happen with security. Hopefully, we'll get that anomaly, get that alert. And if something comes in that doesn't trip the alarm because it's a 0-day threat, hey, at least we're capturing the abnormality within the system and we can look back at it and do the forensics to figure out what's going on. And then below that, then you've got your just your standard, security tools like your backups and recoveries and those things that need to be in there. So if you do have a issue, you can at least restore to a near-term recovery point objective and recovery time objective. So, I've just kind of defined what a service can look like for your account manager. They're probably going to go out there and talk about, hey, we can automate compliance, and we can go out and provide a governance layer on top where you're basically buying a fractional part of a resource who can help guide your security plan and make sure that you're meeting there. And that's where, the compliance, that next tier of compliance layer comes. We've got our evidence. Now we have to do our assessments and actually ensure we're doing what we're doing. Making sure we've got policies, because we always forget about the people in all this, right? Everybody rushed out and sold security awareness. That's great. Do we know if people are actually taking those, or taking the trainings? How many people in the company have taken the training? Where's our gap in knowledge there? Has a social engineering exercise happened anytime recently? Hey, you've got third-party call centers. Do you know if they're being socially engineered? Unfortunately, there's a human layer, an oversight layer that doesn't come out of the automated tools. And that's what's becoming hot, because those are the things that are getting the denials within the cyber liability. Hey, it's all great you put the tools in, but how do you know the tools are doing what they're supposed to do? And oh, by the way, what about the people?
Brian, is there any cadence? Is there any way for the account manager to lead this initiative that isn't in a QBR or a face-to-face? I feel like this is only a face-to-face conversation to get this going. In what world can an email do?
First of all, I mean, it requires a conversation. There's no email that you're going to do. But
Right.
I think an MSP has a huge opportunity to bring thought leadership as part of their marketing drip to get this going, putting on webinars where they bring industry experts that can speak to what's needed for the
Nice.
MSP.
Okay. Yeah.
Depending on how your team's constructed, you might have that leader on team already. And this is a point to start showing their face, since that's also what might be being sold. This is a conversation that can come up in the QBR, but this is a conversation that people should be making. It's almost like marketing a brand new company. You
Yeah.
have to build awareness first for
Totally
your
agree.
customer.
Yeah.
Your account managers have to find things. And again, if you're not in a cadence of sharing information with your clients, you're missing an opportunity. Account managers should be selling every fourth call and sharing the other three, right? And keeping the customer informed. And if they start doing that, then they're going to be able to pivot the conversation at some point into, hey, we've been doing your security stack, because most of the customers have just kind of focused on that over the last couple of years. We're getting this information, but we don't really know what we're doing with this information yet. We
Mm.
don't know, we know we're taking steps to secure you based on what we see, but there's no overarching layer that's saying that you're doing what you need to do inside your business to make sure that what we're doing matters, right? So, again, if I was an account manager, or I am in some
Yeah.
respects with what
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
doing,
Yeah.
it's about doing thought leadership and other you know other other areas of concern and interest that we can engage the customer on, and then really push this thing forward. That's my opinion. It's like any other sale. It's a slow roll. You're not going to do it over in one call and be done with it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I like that 3 to 1. I like that ratio there.
Yep. And what can you be talking about in those 3 to 1s? That's something we should probably share real quick too. It's little things you can be talking about. Share something about the laws in their state that might be changing. Every state's looking at different things. Connecticut just this year introduced that law I mentioned earlier, and a privacy law. These are things that if you're an MSP here in Connecticut or surrounding area, you can be sending that out to your customer, and they should take no offense to that in any way, shape, or form, because you're educating on something that might have slipped through the cracks because it's not big enough to make the newspapers. So that's or the news. So that's part one. Part two, you've got other things you can be putting out in front of your client. Do you know what your attack surface looks like?
Wait,
There are
I'm sorry,
tools.
what?
What your attack surface looks like.
Okay.
There are tools that are out there that people can use as pre-sales. We had Edison Marks on this
Yep.
call, but there's other tools like Security Scorecard out there that go out and really just you put in a domain name, and it can identify where vulnerabilities are your attack surface. Imagine doing a report like that for your customer and just showing them, hey, I just did this. Here are some areas of vulnerability that we don't have control on because it might be around DNS management or things that are with web assets or application assets that they use. So there's 100 ways to engage your customer in a conversation that doesn't have to go straight to this compliance as a service, but gets them starting to think about the vulnerabilities. You know, supply chain threats. Small to mid-sized business do not think about their supply chains, right? You look at CIS controls implementation group number 1, which is recommended to customers under 250. It's to guard you, or it's to do your best efforts so you protect yourself against non-targeted attacks. Your company is not somebody that's being targeted. So, historically, so they're just looking
Yeah.
for ports that are open so they can wreak some havoc, right? But it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
meant with intention to you, but you can fall victim to it. Think of your suppliers, though. You processing your payroll with ADP?
Oh yeah.
They're probably being targeted. Do you have a vendor risk assessment on them? Do you know where that data is even being stored with them, right? These are things that companies don't think about yet, that a compliance as a service or a VCSO as a service, person at the top level can really be helping them understand and looking at them and saying, hey, building I love the business canvas for this. Build their go-to-market, build their operational side of things and their value prop, and see where the third-party vendors are, and then see if they've got third-party risk assessment set up.
Yeah.
If they don't, then this is an opportunity to start introducing that as a service to them.
Yeah, I love that business canvas too. Leanstack.com is the one we always use. Absolutely love that. It
Why
helps
don't you
all the
use the one
time.
in sales maturity that you
I do
you
now. I do
now own,
now, but
brother?
back in the day, I didn't want to self-promote there.
No, but all kidding aside, wherever you do your canvas from, I mean, honestly, you could just do a search on business canvas model and you'd be able to
Yeah.
pull down a PDF that you can fill out.
Yeah.
The
And work
point
through.
is, the more you understand how your customer operates, the easier you're going to spot security vulnerabilities you didn't know before, and the more value you can bring to a customer just by pointing them out. Because a lot of times they're going to have to take the steps to do it, not you. But you're demonstrating leadership and you can really talk about how a VC sub will come. And this will be part of the next wave of MSPs.
I completely agree.
The people that are knocking on my door now to talk about security, it's tenfold over what it was 6 months ago.
All right, Brian, the other time here before, give me one place that somebody can go to learn more, at the account management level, right? So like that person that's just trying to dip their toes in, trying to get ahead of the curve. Is there a resource, a website that you like out there that has some good information?
So, look, if you go up to CIS's Center for Internet Security Organization,
Mhm.
I don't have the address in front of me, but I'm sure it's probably cis.org.
Okay.
If you go up there, just take a look at the syscontrols version 8 and learn a little bit about implementation group number 1, 2, and 3. If you just look at those implementation groups and the way they define them there and talk about what the differences are between those groups, biggest ones being really size of organization and whether or not they employ security analysts in-house,
Mhm.
really kind of dictates it. It's going to give you a sense where your opportunity is to penetrate there. Then as you look through their news, you're going to get input on any of the regulations that are changing. So do a search on your state while you're there and see if anything comes up on CIS.
Oh, great idea.
That's kind of step one. I mean, you can go out to NIST for this. You can go out to, they all have it, news feeds that you can tap into. There's probably a variety of sources. MSP Alert will tell you a little bit of information, but a lot of that's usually vendor specific.
Mhm.
But the point is, there's a ton of research out there, but look at the regulations and the frameworks that exist. You want to
Good.
learn about ISO? Go up to ISO site. You want to learn about CIS and how their controls work? Go there. But one of the things I love about CIS is they also have benchmarks for all the different products we have. And that might even help bring some additional education on the things you already sell.
Good.
Office 365 and how to talk security about just that point product.
Okay.
As an example.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate, this was a good one. You gave me some knowledge here too. So I appreciate it.
Listener, I just want to say this. Rob has yet to say we've done a bad one. So I'm unsure how to take that one, but hopefully
You're
every week
pro
I get a little
level,
something
Brian. You're
out.
pro level.
But
Hey man, I really appreciate it here today. For anybody out there putting this up and on YouTube as well. So please go there, like and subscribe if you can. Brian, as always, I appreciate you, sir. And until next time, talk to you later.
sounds great, Rob. Take care.
All right, take care.